What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Gonna film a video today. I'll call it a quick video because it's getting late in the day and I need to hurry up and get this vehicle done. But I wanted to give some tips and tricks on alternator replacement, as you can see from the title, on your 91 or similar Mercedes 500 SL. And I found some tricks to do this. So I'm going to kind of take you backwards now that I've already gotten it out. But I'll give you the tips along the way so you don't have to watch the whole video to get to removal. But one thing I wanted to point out here is swapping your pulley over from the old alternator to the new one if you did not get a new pulley is pretty simple. You're going to buzz out the 7/8. It's probably actually metric, but the 7/8 will fit. So try and hold this pulley still. What I did is just put it on the ground and stood or used one foot to kind of hold the whole thing from spinning and buzz that out with an impact. And then if it won't come right off, all I did was heated with my propane torch, heated up this pulley a little bit. You can see a nice little holder is to put a bolt in your vise and then rest the whole thing down on the vise. As you heat this, you can slide in a flat screwdriver and it will slide right off. Mine was pretty rusty and it was fairly easy to get off. So that's going to be your best bet there. It's still smoking hot. So I'm going to cool that down and I'll take you back out to the car and show you how I got this out. One thing I wanted to add before we head outside is you'll obviously reuse your pulley, and I'm using the new fan blade, but I'm using the original nut off of the old alternator. Reason being is the new nut is not tall enough, so by the time it's fully tight, these will still be loose on the shaft. So you can either add a washer, maybe a lock washer with your new nut, or in my case I use the old nut. If you do use the new one, it was a 15/16 versus the 7/8 of the old one. Alright, we'll head outside and I'll show you the trick. Here we are under the hood, and I wanted to show the method that I used. Initially I started by trying to remove the fan clutch, and there's a pretty good video on that using a shortened 8mm hex driver, which I tried and it would have worked, except I did not have it all the way in and I rounded the socket. So I tried with that for hours. I think I spent 2 hours hassling with that before I went to this method. And I would almost recommend starting with this because in my opinion it's much easier anyway. So what you're going to do is unsnap your plastic cover on the passenger side head right here on the front of the head. I'll show you that cover. Right here, this just snaps off on the outside and then slides out. Underneath that, you're going to see your distributor cap with all the spark plug wires. And so you're going to unbolt that. That's 3 5mm Allen headed screws right here, 1, 2, 3. Then you'll be able to pull that out and set it out of the way. I set that over here. And behind that is this cover. And that has a couple more, I think 5mm screws holding it in place. Once you've got that off, you can kind of pull this out and slide it. There's a little bit of a snap that holds it in place on the right side. So when you slide this, you'll have to pull it out of that snap, and you can set that out of your way. And then you're left with this. Oh, one final step is to move your fan shroud. That's just a matter of undoing this clip at the top, turning it. It's labeled open and close, so turn it to open, push it, and then slide it out of your way. So here's kind of what we're left with. Sorry about the lighting. I'm out in the sun here. But anyway, once you get to this point, you can, of course, unbolt your alternator. I had already done that, but you could do it at this point. That was, I want to say, a 17mm up at the top here, and a 13, I think it was a 13, down at the bottom. You have just enough room to get that out. And one other step that I did is on my water pump pulley, I ground just a tiny relief out of this lip on the back side, and that allowed the bolt to slide out. Just a tiny little relief there. You don't want to gouge your pulley, but this is the back lipped section that doesn't really matter. And I'm going to smooth that out before I put the belt back on. And going back in, I think I'll use a socket-headed bolt. I don't have to, but if I use a socket-headed bolt, it'll clear this no problem and won't be an issue in the future. So once you've got your mounting bolts out, you'll tip the alternator down to have access to the 13 and the 8mm bolts holding the two cables on. And then there's just enough room in a certain orientation to get it up here, and you have to push just a little bit to kind of flex the engine up out of your way, and you can pull the alternator out. It sounds worse than it is. It's really not bad. You just have to fiddle with it for a little bit until you find just the right orientation to pull it out. And now going back in, I believe my new alternator is actually a little bit smaller than the original, so it should go back in no problem. I don't think I'll be able to do it one-handed, but give me a second and I'll show you once it's back in. Alright, yeah guys, the new alternator is much smaller. It actually fell right in there. I didn't have my hand on it, and it was such a loose fit, it dropped right in. So I'm just going to get things hooked up in the back again with my two cables, and I'll slide it in and bolt it in place. I will be back with you in 1 second. Alright guys, this lower mounting bolt is a little bit of a challenge to get started. So what I did and recommend is after you've gotten your cables bolted on, make sure to do that first because you don't have access later. So get your cables bolted on and leave the top bolt out. You can see that I've got the top bolt out and the alternator swung down a little bit to wiggle and get that bottom one started. So that gives you a little bit of play to kind of wiggle it as you push the bolt into the hole and just get it threaded. And in my case, it's tight, not like stripped tight or cross-threaded tight, but it is tight the whole way. So I can't just spin it in by hand, unfortunately. But the way you're going to do this is line up that little relief that you cut or ground in the water pump pulley, and using an open-end 13 wrench, you can get a turn on it. So let me try and show you that down here. You can see right here, I can just get on it. Give me a second, one-handed working over the camera here. I can just get on it, get a turn, and then go down and grab it again and get a turn, and just keep working that way, and you can get this in. So I'm just going to get it real close and then swing the alternator up and get my top bolt started. One additional step that'll help is to remove this small section of air duct. I've already gotten mine out, and all you need to do is remove the two clips that hold it in place. The center portion pulls up and then the whole clip comes out, and it just slides right into a slot here towards the front of the engine next to the radiator fan. So I've got my new alternator back in, and this was the wrong alternator on a previous clip that you've possibly seen. This one ends in A, the other one ends in B, and I'll show you that part number. You want to make sure that you use this ending in A, and I don't remember the number, but I'll show you here shortly. And it's a little bit more snug going back in. The way that I got it in is exactly in the orientation that it sits now, with the bolt holes in the same spot. I slid it forward because there's a little bit of a smaller section of the alternator versus this outer front section. Right here, the back half is a little bit thinner. So that's the section that you want up against the engine here and the front mounting tab of the alternator. And you're just going to push slightly, and you can just flex the engine a little bit to knock that down in there and slide it back into place. I started with the bottom bolt, getting it in loosely, and then pivoted everything up and put the top bolt in. Again, remembering to attach your two wires before you bolt the alternator in place. That would be my recommendation. Then I simply put the 3 hex bolts back in, holding the distributor cap on. I'm going to clip this duct back in place, put my plastic cover on, and I'll show you that, and then we'll give it a try. So here's where we're at now. I replaced the plastic cover and then put the distributor cap on. You've got to have the cover in place first. One thing that'll make it quite a bit easier is remove this single 13mm bolt that holds the dipstick in place, because that's also holding this conduit that needs to tuck in to the edge of the black plastic cover here behind the distributor. So pull that out, you can swing this out of the way, and then you'll tuck this in, and there's 3 hex-headed screws, 1, 2, and then a third one down on the bottom. Put that in, put your cap in place, and then I just need to tuck my plug wires in out of the way here, and we'll snap our next cover back on. And if you remember, this one tucked in on the front side and then it swung around. So we tucked it in there and then swung it around, and I think it snaps in. I might need a second hand just to kind of look around. Yep, there's our snap down at the bottom. Just make sure everything's out of the way here. I'm going to use 2 hands real... Oh, that's what I did wrong. Swing my wire holder back up. Trying to tuck quite a few wires in here. It is a squeeze. Alright. So we'll put this end under and hook it on top, right up there, and then swing it in. I'm going to need one more hand to do this, but I'll show you once I get it on. So the way that goes is you push it back and then down. There's a channel here that the plastic needs to lock into, and then you press it down and engage this clip right down here. So we've got that on. The final piece of the puzzle is to reattach our air duct right here. I already twisted my fan shroud back in place. That's simply just put your open close up at the top, push all the buttons in all the way around, and then turn it. And we'll slide this locking clip back in place and finally attach our air duct.